Hi, welcome to Week in Review, where we look at some of the news and the headlines. I'm Phil O'Connor, the Live Enterprise Director, joined again this week by a stellar cast. We've got Kayla Branch from the Dig Team, we've got Chris Castile, our political reporter extraordinaire, Ryan Sharp, the business editor, and of course my old friend Don Mecoy, the business editor. We got a lot of stuff going on this week. Did I call you the business editor?
It's okay.
It's okay. You're actually the sports editor. You're still the business editor. There was no change in the leadership structure. Let's get right to it. Elections Tuesday. Shocks kind of all around. Oklahoma City former mayor Mick Cornett gets through. What's the outlook going forward?
I think that Mick Cornett did what a lot of people expect him to do, which is perform very well in the most important part, Republican part of the state. Oklahoma County, Canadian County, Cleveland County, right here in the metro area, his home area, are the three of the four counties with the largest Republican registration. He did very well. He creamed Todd Lamb and Kevin Stitt in three of the most important counties in the state. So he finished first. Kevin Stitt edged out Todd Lamb, spent a lot of money, $5 million, $3 million of his own, ran nonstop ads and had an outsider message in a year when people are looking for outsiders, and that left the ultimate insider, Todd Lamb, on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Todd Lamb has had the longest going campaign, maybe arguably the most organized campaign.
It was a flawless campaign in a lot of ways. You know, he just ran textbook campaign, and he just came up against, the deep dissatisfaction. I'm not sure how many voters know in Oklahoma that Lieutenant Governor and Governor don't run together. It's not like a ticket like President and Vice President. So I'm sure there is a share. I don't know what number it would be. A share out there who believe that that's probably Fallon's running mate, or not. Maybe they didn't even give it that much thought. The whole idea of an outsider message was very appealing. And you had a lot of people that showed up to vote on marijuana.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But let's talk about the most stinging rebuke maybe for Todd Lamb. His hometown vote. His
home county, Garfield County, which I was really surprised. Mick Cornett beat him by 73 votes in a county where his father was a longtime beloved, I believe, state senator. His mom, as Todd Lamb would say on the stump sometimes, was so involved in the Garfield County Republican Women's Club, he thought it was daycare because he grew up there. And yeah, it was I think, a stinging rebuke.
So in the fall election, we'll have we'll have a Tulsa candidate and an Oklahoma City candidate.
No, in the summer election.
In the summer election, you'll have Tulsa versus OKC.
Cornett versus Stitt.
Both where the majority of the Republican vote resides, right? The largest number of voters.
Right. Because even some of the suburbs outside Tulsa are heavily Republican too.
And you're predicting it'll be an outsider message versus.
Well, Cornett can run as an outsider to state government, but I think the broader message that Stitt has, that can capture Cornett, even though he's not part of state government, is career politician. Cornett has been, he was 14 years as mayor, and I believe 2 on the city council before that. He also ran for Congress during that time, and now he's running. So he's the kind of guy where Stitt will probably try to label as he's just running for. I'm running for the next generation. He's just running for his next office. So even though Cornett has no connection to state government, he'll still get painted, I believe, as a career politician. And
now let's talk about what really maybe motivated voters this election: the medical marijuana issue.
There's no doubt. Kayla and Kelsey and a couple of other interns were out at polling places around the city, and you went to 2 or 3, right?
Right.
And I think, wasn't the message always the same? I'm here to vote on marijuana?
It was, yeah. I had multiple people tell me that the only reason they came out to vote was to vote on State Question 788.
Right.
I can remember we had one 40-year-old voter that told one of them that this is his first time voting, and the reason he was here today was the medical marijuana issue.
I don't remember if that was Kayla or something. Yeah, I remember that one too.
So
wasn't it like 40,000 people voted on marijuana that didn't vote in a primary? They said, just give me the marijuana ballot and I'm out of here.
Yeah. So obviously that was a driving force. We had the highest turnout we've had in a primary election.
Yeah, it was higher. The primary turnout was higher than the general election turnout of 2014, and it was even higher than presidential preference primary of 2016.
So we've got, of course, more elections to look forward to, and of course the medical marijuana issue is going to be in the headlines for quite some time, because you still have the issue of what are the regulations that are going to be put on it, and you have the supporters of that who are already pushing back saying, you better not do too much, or you better not do what we don't like, or we're going to come back with a constitutional amendment that seeks to solidify some of this stuff. So really interesting story. We'll continue to be on that one. Ryan, let's talk about Paul George and free agency and what the Thunder may look like next year.
As I said earlier, how much time do you have? It's not an easy situation to explain or even understand, frankly. The NBA's collective bargaining agreement is one of the most confusing documents I've ever put my hands on. I told Don a while ago, I liken it to calculus. There are so many moving numbers and things that you have to consider in terms that you don't use in everyday conversations, especially when you're just talking about basketball. But the general idea is he's opted out of his contract, or the year that he had left on his contract, to become a free agent. Free agency doesn't technically start until July 1, so while it hasn't technically started, it has started. You've got a lot of moving pieces. Just today, LeBron James elected not, excuse me, not to opt in to the final year of his deal in Cleveland, which will start a lot of things in motion. There's already rumors about LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, which is also a pull for Paul George. You hear about Kawhi Leonard in San Antonio wanting out of San Antonio. All three of those guys are in very different situations. Kawhi Leonard would have to be traded. Paul George is, like I said, opted out of the final year of his deal. LeBron James just didn't opt in. I know that's a very small difference, but it's pretty big when you look at the CBA and the salary structures that those guys have. So what it all comes down to is Paul George is going to have 2 or 3 options. He can re-sign a max deal with the Thunder, which would be for 5 years. He can sign a 1-and-1, which would be a 1-year contract with a player option for a second year, essentially another year loan for Paul George for the Thunder, for them to be able to try to convince him to stay away from LA. And the third option would be a 2-and-1, a 2-year deal with a third-year player option. What that would do is give him a couple years before he would become an unrestricted free agent. It would also put him over a threshold where then another team could offer him a max deal. Again, like I said, it's all super confusing and there are 100 different factors that play into it. But over the next week or so, we should have a much better idea what this team is going to look like come next fall when they start training camp and preseason games. There's other moving pieces for the Thunder, obviously. You've got the Carmelo Anthony question. Do they want to pony up and pay him in addition to Paul George and Steven Adams and Russell Westbrook? Is he willing to take a reduced role with the Thunder? So there's a lot of moving parts, and hopefully over the next week or so we'll get some clarity.
My gut reaction to what you're saying is that he's leaving.
See, my gut reaction is different. There's reasons for him to stay here.
They can offer him another year, for one thing, a year more than anybody else. Plus these complicated contracts he's talking about, that threshold's really important. When he gets to 10 years of experience, then he can get the mega contract.
Yeah, so if he signs the 1-and-1, that gets him 9 years into his career in the NBA. So the 2-and-1 option would be a better option for him if just talking pure money, because he could sign a bigger deal with the Thunder. And again, it puts him over that threshold of being in the league for 10 years, which opens the door for any team to be able to offer him a 5-year max contract. Then you're talking buku money. I mean,
Why
that's
would he deserve it? When he had total bust in the playoffs, what did he pay?
He's still one of the
gazillions.
He's one of the top. He's still one of the top 10 players in the league.
And that kind of makes you wonder how many good players there are in the NBA, doesn't it? I mean,
it does. Well, listen,
it's such a small number, and they seem to all be on the same team.
Well, that's my question is, you know, we were talking Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and LeBron maybe ending up in LA. That is not good for the league. You know, when the best players all get together and say, let's go make us a super team. You know, where does that leave the other 24 or 26 teams in the league? You know,
not to keep going back to this, but you know who we can blame for all of this, right?
Us.
Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
I realize that LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade did their deal in Miami a few years ago. That was a different league and a different salary cap structure. That was a completely different situation. Kevin Durant's move to Golden State is what triggered all of this. And so now you have all these players looking to join up with other teams. You have reports every single day of LeBron texting Kevin Durant, LeBron texting Kawhi Leonard, things like that. These guys trying to get together and form these super teams in order to compete with one team.
I guess I do remember. I'm old enough to remember the Celtics, Lakers, and Sixers. I guess there
And
was
that's
a
the
time
thing, you know, well,
in
the
the
Bulls,
NBA when it was a
it's
three-team
actually
league.
the Chicago Bulls of the 90s.
Sure,
Didn't they win
yeah.
6?
Yeah, but again, you didn't have guys leaving to form a super team.
Right,
You had
no,
two
yeah.
guys that were the catalyst for that team, and then they just kept adding random pieces to it that
Right.
worked out. I
Right.
mean, guys like John Paxson and B.J. Armstrong, Ron
Rodman.
Steve Kerr. I mean, Rodman. I mean, they just kept adding pieces through free agencies, through minor trades. It was a much different deal than what you have now with these superstars deciding where they're going to go, how much they're going to get paid, who they're going to team up with.
Don, you're still on the market, right?
Yes, I'm
in
available.
free agency. Okay.
I would sign for the veterans, the
about to
really
say-
old veterans minimum.
Okay.
And they may need it when all this is said and done. So,
Okay, Don, let's talk about something else that's fun, liquor laws. Oklahoma may have finally gotten rid of its last dry counties.
Yes, Oklahoma goes wet. As you know, our state went wet about 25 years after the United States repealed prohibition, but we still had dry counties. But with the changes that are coming in October with the liquor reforms that were passed last year that voters approved, essentially what's going to happen is there's these places in these dry counties, you know, pool halls, bars, whatever, restaurants that can serve 3-2 beer. Well, with the changes in the laws, Oklahoma is one of the few states that still sells 3-2 beers. The large breweries, Anheuser-Busch, Miller, and so forth, are expected at some point after that takes effect in Oklahoma that they're not going to be making 3-2 beer anymore. So essentially, these places would not be able to serve beer. So these counties, 14 counties that were dry, they all got on the ballot and they all approved going wet so that they can, these establishments that are already there will be able to serve beer come October.
And we read some stories during the course of the election, of course, and if you've been out in small towns in western Oklahoma or any state where there's, you know, the one little place in town where you can go and get a beer, it is sort of the social hub of the community in a lot of ways. You know, there's the one little spot in town, and these people were saying, look, if you know we're going to be out of business, we're going to have to close down our restaurant, you know, because we can't survive on it, you know, if we don't.
Well, that message obviously really resonated with the voters and the residents of these counties because, you know, for a long time there have been efforts before to try and make these counties go wet, and it was just like, no, we don't want that. I can still go down and get a Coors at the, you know, at the bar, and but when you tell them that you're not even going to have that, and in some counties it was overwhelming, over 60%. We do have one county though.
10 votes.
Yeah, in Beaver County, it was approved by about 7 or 8 votes, but there's 10 provisional ballots that they're going to open up today, Friday. And if 8 or 9 of those are no votes, it could actually fail in Beaver County. But they're probably it's probably gonna persevere.
Let us hope. Poor Beaver County. Okay, Kayla, let's turn to something that is much more serious. All year long, we've been focusing on some of the poor rankings and metrics that Oklahoma confronts on a variety of issues. This weekend, we've got what we hope is a little bit more of a hopeful story, but about an issue that's really problematic in Oklahoma, and that's the issue of childhood trauma. And you have a story this weekend about Camp Hope. Tell us a little bit about the story and what you found at Camp Hope.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Oklahoma ranks really low on a lot of different measures. So with childhood trauma, in the past 10 years, we have the highest rate of childhood abuse, confirmed cases in the state in the last decade, about 15,000 cases. And so Oklahoma also ranks really high on things that can cause childhood trauma. So poverty, having a parent incarcerated, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, domestic violence. So all of those things are working together to create this real issue. But with Camp Hope, you've got this campground up in Northeast Tulsa that they go to 1 week out of the summer. And they have games and swimming and all kinds of things you find at a normal camp. But they also have basically little booklets that they'll do. And they'll have a person that was famous, maybe I think Maya Angelou was brought up to me, and they read about a person that had to overcome difficulty in their own life, persevere, and try to accomplish their goals. So they do that. They also have these things called campfires at the end of every day, and they'll go and they'll sing songs and have fun, but then they'll end up breaking into groups and they'll talk about where they found hope that day and encouragement. They'll share personal stories. They'll get advice from counselors, from other campers. So it's a really big focus on community and communication. There's only about 62 campers that were there this year, but it's continued to grow, and they expect it to continue to grow. But for me, the real interesting part of writing the story was learning about hope research, which I didn't know was a real thing that happened. So OU has a Hope Research Center, and there are actual scientists and researchers that are studying the effects of hope in a very analytical way. So for Camp Hope, they give a measurement and assessment to campers 30 days before camp, the last day of camp, and 30 days after camp. So they're measuring how hopeful they are in their own lives, which basically just means can I set goals for myself, and do I think that I can actually meet those goals and make a difference in my own life? And they found that campers who go to places and participate in programs like Camp Hope do actually have increases in their hope, and they do actually have changes in future outcomes, so like academic performance. So it was really interesting to learn about all that and how they're trying to fight these bad statistics that Oklahoma has with childhood trauma by using hope in a scientific way.
Right, and so the camp itself is sort of a laboratory for these folks at OU, that they are working closely with it to see the impacts of what's being done there, the therapies that are being used at this camp. It's a great story. We've been, like I said, we've been focusing on this issue all year, the state of Oklahoma, but we're also looking for stories like this that try to, that provide some answers, some direction where there's been some success, and this is a great example of that. We have these stories all year long, every day of the week. Pick us up, check us out. It's cheap. You can get an online subscription. And if you haven't checked out News OK Pro, take a look at it. It's an ad-free experience where you get all the information that we normally provide on News OK. You can tailor it to what you want to read. It's a great product. Check it out. I think you'll like that as well. We'll see you next week.